What really makes people hesitant about vaccines? We'll find out today on this episode of Vax Matters.
Hello, everyone, and thanks for streaming Vax Matters. Here with us today are Gretchen Schulz and Alex Michel, research associates at the Johns Hopkins University Bloomberg School of Public Health. Now, their work has included creating the course, How to Talk to Parents About Vaccines, which we'll learn a little bit about today. They'll also help us understand why many are so hesitant to receive vaccines and how perceptions about the COVID-19 vaccine may have encouraged that feeling. Welcome to you both.
Thank you so much. It's a pleasure to be with you all today.
Thank you, ladies. And again, we are just so honored by your expertise on the matter, and especially talking about the course of how to talk to parents about vaccines. It all goes back to vaccine confidence. So let's talk about that as we start off our podcast today. Why is that so important?
I can start off on this one. So vaccine confidence is when people feel confident that the vaccines do what they're supposed to be doing, right? So vaccines keep us and our families from getting sick. And, most people are vaccine confident. They do believe, vaccines keep us from getting sick. And that's why we've had polio eliminated in so many places in the world. But, sometimes people, they have questions or they have concerns. Sometimes it's about vaccines generally. Sometimes it's about a particular vaccine. And when we as public health professionals actually listen and answer people's questions, most people will feel much more confident about actually getting a vaccine when they have their questions answered. And so during the pandemic, we've seen vaccine hesitancy largely due to public fear and uncertainty around this new virus. Probably the most important thing to know about vaccine confidence is that it can change. So for a lot of people, even if they have questions, they're really just trying to do what's best for themselves and their families. And so if we can get them the information that they're looking for, how do vaccines work? What are potential side effects they may be, have some concerns about? Are vaccines, how much do they cost? Is the COVID vaccine really going to be free? People can become much more confident. And that's really important because, again, the whole point of vaccine confidence is, making sure that people don't get sick and that we keep everybody healthy.
It's interesting how fast people jump to mistrust about vaccines when, we all had a crash course in virology when COVID-19 came along and people had to read about what this was going to do and what side effects existed and whatnot. And then the story about the vaccine began to grow because we were thinking, okay, what do we do about it? And trust is at the core, I believe, of people's ability to go to a doctor and say, I want the vaccine. Can you talk a little bit about building trust and what do you use to establish that rapport with someone to know that, hey, it's healthy and it is smart to go and get vaccinated?
Yeah, I think that's a really important question. We've seen throughout the years, both historically and currently, that medical professionals, doctors, nurses, et cetera, are at the forefront of confidence. We still do, as a whole, really trust our doctors' expertise in terms of if they recommend the vaccine or any vaccine, whether it's the COVID vaccine, or others, it is really important that they promote it and really are able, like Alex was saying, to answer those questions. I think there's been a lot of jumping to mistrust or questioning the effectiveness or safety of this vaccine in particular, because it's sort of unfolding as this pandemic has been unfolding. We've been learning so much in such a short amount of time, whereas a lot of us really don't remember or didn't really learn about the long process of developing like the polio vaccine or other vaccines. We just kind of trusted that it was the right thing to do because our doctors were recommending it. And while that is important to keep in mind, it's also important that we are able to educate ourselves, that doctors are able to educate their patients and talk about what are the questions that they may be having and what are their concerns, so that they can feel much more confident going into getting vaccinated for themselves, their children, and other family members.
And as we all know, just going to the doctor ourselves throughout our lifetime, doctors or medical professionals in general, you all have your own language. Medical professionals have your own language, and to break it down so that we can understand it. And sometimes, and you're not trying to dumb anything down, but we do need to understand. And so that really is a challenge for you all too, to make certain that people understand and can make the best decisions possible, as you mentioned, for yourselves or for your family. So you have a course, is that correct, about how to talk to parents about vaccines? That's an interesting course at Johns Hopkins. Why and how was that created?
Yeah, that's really important. You touched on two really important points. Is one, medical professionals and researchers, I think notoriously have not been great at communicating with the public, in terms of, there's this assumption that I'm an expert, so everyone's an expert, and I can use, medical jargon or other more convoluted terminology that may not be something that the average person knows and understands really well. And so that's part of the communication strategy there, is really kind of making sure that we're able to, as professionals, whether it's medical professionals, researchers, et cetera, to be able to break down these concepts and these concerns and answer them to the lay audience that would really understand and get a full grasp of why this is important, what are the side effects that may be occurring, and how can I be part of this growth and improvement in vaccine confidence. But really developing this course came from a lot of parents being really hesitant as the COVID vaccine, not only for themselves, they were hesitant, but also once we were able to vaccinate children in that sort of 5 to 11 age range, parents were really, really hesitant to do so. And so we thought, let's put together something in which we can not only help to educate and answer questions that people may have, the general public may have about COVID vaccines, but also be able to really share those strong communication techniques to be able to talk not only just to other parents, even though that was really the impetus for this, but also just the general public. We've seen throughout this course that parents are sharing some of the videos with their kids so that they can understand and feel more confident about getting the vaccine, or sharing it with, grandparents. And that is, so it is definitely, we geared it originally towards parents having communication with other parents on a day-to-day basis, but it's really so much larger than that. And that these communication strategies are much more applicable than just a parent-to-parent contact.
And it's not just COVID-19, correct? This is about across the board for all vaccines.
Our training is really focused on COVID-19 vaccines because we were just getting a lot of questions about this. And, one of the things I think is really important too, in thinking about how do we answer people's questions, really in good faith. And I think parents are just really good at talking to other parents. So we really wanted to make something for them so that, they could go to one place, feel really confident that all of the information is credible and true, that they're not getting sort of bamboozled by misinformation or false information or anything like that. And that breaks things down very concisely just to get to the answers that people are looking for. And so we put this course together, and a big shout out to the parents and teachers who, sat in on an advisory board with us and really walked us through some of the concerns and questions that they had and that some of their friends had. So we worked with a group of parents and teachers from all over the country to really try to understand, how to make it easier for them. Because being a parent or often case, teachers often are parents as well. It was just really tough. It was really tough for them to figure out the answers to some of these questions. And parents are just trying to do the best they can. They want to protect their families. They want to make the best decisions for their children. And, a lot of parents have a pediatrician or someone they can speak to who's a medical professional. But a lot of people also don't necessarily have a pediatrician or a regular health provider that they feel like they can really go to for answers for some of this. So we just wanted to make it easy for people to get the answers that they were already looking for. And again, huge thank you to the parents and teachers who helped us put this training together and really, sat down with us for several hours and kind of walked us through, what matters to them and sort of what, just what concerns and questions that they've had over the course of this pandemic.
So I'm to understand that after someone has taken your course, they're considered an ambassador. And then from that point, they can, in their homes and in their community, impact the way people understand vaccines. How does one do that?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So yes, you're absolutely correct. This training is ideally to help promote the idea of a vaccine ambassador. This foundational knowledge and understanding of not only how the vaccine was developed, but sort of the background of how our bodies and immunology works, and the development and safety and side effects of the COVID-19 vaccine specifically, but also more broadly, communication strategies to have these really difficult and sometimes tense conversations. And so with this training, we're promoting that people feel confident in being able to promote accurate information, whether that's in face-to-face conversation, or if they're able, we have a lot of this is accessible and can be shared online. I know that several of the folks from our team really shared a lot of the videos that were really simple 1 to 2 minute explainer videos on various topics. And that too can be a really great, easy way for people to get accurate and truthful information out there, not just in their direct contact, but also to people that they may follow on Facebook or on other social media platforms. And so that can help to promote, again, greater education and a greater foundation for feeling vaccine confident, especially as we're looking at vaccinating children and those who are even younger.
Alex, can you break down the specifics of this course? What I know it took a good long while, as you both said, and you got so much valuable input. But when you talk about the course and, short snippets and answers and just easy to understand and vignettes and videos, what specifically is the course and how does it work?
Yeah, so our training, our course is hosted on a website called Coursera, and it's free. And you can take courses on pretty much anything on Coursera. And so it'll work on your phone, it'll work on a computer. And basically you create an account on the course. So you would go to www.coursera.org, or you can also, Google parent vaccine ambassador training, and it'll come up and you create an account, and that lets you go through and complete some of these different modules. And again, this was some advice we got from the parents and teachers, which is that they're tired. They don't want to watch 1 hour lecture. So
yeah. No time.
No time. So we tried to keep things, fun and short. And so people were really like, can you, one, keep things really to the point and keep it short and just answer my question. And then two, the course also has quizzes. So if you complete the quizzes and you pass them, you get, a little certificate of completion. But it also just helps people, test themselves to be like, I think I understand, basic immunology. I mean, when I was in high school, I don't think we even learned about how vaccines worked. So, I think a lot of people have been really interested in just learning, one, some of the basic science of, how does the immune system work? How do vaccines work? What is the approval process for vaccines? But then also a lot of these other questions that are really important. So, Gretchen brought up interpersonal communication. So that's our science jargon for it. But it's that, you're at soccer practice, you're picking the kids up, and somebody asks you, are you thinking about getting your kid vaccinated? What are you thinking about? And that's an opportunity for people to, be a resource for the other parents or, or just the other folks in their community to try to help answer some of these really basic questions that a lot of people have. And this is true for lots of things too, not just COVID vaccines. So the course covers some of these, some of the research on how to have conversations with people about science. So there's a whole body of research on the science of science communication. And this is shown over and over and over again that just giving people the facts is not enough. To have meaningful conversations, we also need to really listen to people, and we need to answer their questions with a sense of trust and empathy along with the facts. And I think that parents and teachers are just, intuitively really good at doing that because they're in that boat. They're trying to figure out what is best. And they're looking at this information and they're trying to assess, what makes sense for their family. So they get it. So it's really, I think, just kind of a great opportunity for people to kind of help each other out with sorting through all of this information that's out there and making some of these decisions that for some people, it's a really difficult decision.
And I like it when you said that there is a quiz at the end of each little mini segment because, when we're talking about misinformation, sometimes people think, oh, I know that. Well, you take a quiz and you get the wrong button and you don't know. And this way you find out that, no, this is not true, or I misunderstood something. And it's immediate gratification when you take your quiz. Either you pass it or you don't, or right away that you've got the right or wrong answer. So that is a perfect tool also for parents and for teachers. And again, these are quick. These are little vignettes, so it doesn't take a lot of time. Congratulations on doing this. What has been the response from people so far?
Thank you. So, it's been overwhelmingly positive. We promoted this and published this training back in January, and it has really just taken off. And overwhelmingly, parents, teachers, other people in the public, not just in our own country, but in other countries, have gotten a hold of this training and have found it really, really educational. Wow. Really succinct. One of the best things about it is it can take you anywhere between an hour and 90 minutes, and that's it. And you're able to really focus in on what are the answers that you need and what are the things that you're wanting to find out and learn more about, and focus on that more specifically if you're not really wanting to take the full course, although we recommend that everyone take the full course. But it has been absolutely astounding how many people have responded so positively. Overall, we have over 25,000 people currently enrolled. And
now, how many? 25,000?
25,000.
Oh my goodness.
It has been, and we've gotten responses from people as far away as the Philippines and India. And so it's not just folks in our own backyard, but everyone is wanting more of this information.
So it's working. It's definitely working then.
It is. We have about 12,000 people that have already completed the course since January. And like I said, almost 26,000 people that are currently enrolled in the course.
I think I want to ask for people, because that's fantastic. 12,000 who have completed, 25,000 enrolled.
Yes.
Wow. So I know that it's going to beg an obvious question for someone listening to you now. If someone wants to participate in this course, what do they do? I think Alex referenced it earlier, but what do you do?
Yes. So you can easily go to Coursera.org, or like Alex mentioned, you can just Google easily COVID vaccine ambassador training, how to talk to parents, and it will come up, and you'll click on that link. You'll create a really simple, easy sort of profile with your email and a password just to kind of set yourself up. And then you have full unlimited access to the modules that we have, all of the information. We do also have additional resources for each of the modules if people want to learn more about a specific topic that really was a bit more information that we necessarily wanted to or needed to share. With this, there's an additional resource page that has everything, links to more videos, additional readings, etc. If people want to learn for instance, a little bit more about the vaccine approval process or more about vaccine communication, et cetera, there's additional resources as well.
So, go ahead. I'm sorry, Alex.
Oh, yeah. We also, because of the success of the course, just recently it's been translated into Spanish. And so if anyone is interested in taking the course and you speak Spanish, that is also available on Coursera.org. And so if you are looking for Spanish language resources, that is also another way to take this course or to complete this training.
Do you in the future see, because of how popular this is right now, how well received, do you see doing more, adding more to what you've already had as far as your program, as far as taking this course?
Yeah, absolutely. One group of people that's been really interested in some additional resources are actually, people who are healthcare workers themselves, because, they typically don't get training as part of their education on what do you do if someone comes to you and they've seen misinformation, or how do you have conversations sometimes when, people have some of these concerns. And so we've actually been working with healthcare professionals to develop some resources for them to help them have some of these conversations. And then again, also to kind of help them be ambassadors, not just with their own patients or in their own practice, but also, on social media, so that they can sort of have some of the skills for what do you do if you see, someone that is your friend on Facebook or who's in a Facebook group with you share misinformation. How can you sort of step in a way that's helpful and not just, gonna cause an argument or cause disagreements, And so another area that we've been really interested in and have gotten a lot of really positive response from this course is we have a section on misinformation, and that applies, generally. So it's really, our examples are about vaccines in our training, but a lot of this research around misinformation applies to lots of different types of misinformation. And so rather than sort of encouraging people to act as fact checkers, we sort of encourage ambassadors, and this is what that section of the course really covers, to learn about, how is misinformation spread? What are some of these sort of sneaky strategies that are used to kind of, get people to click on things that are not necessarily true, so that people, one, know how to spot misinformation, and then two, are able to kind of explain this to some of their friends, their families, the people that they work with. And that can really, really help stop the spread of misinformation. It's one of the, I think one of the really important things about this training is that you really can make a difference. It can feel very overwhelming because, there's misinformation all over social media. But when someone you trust, who you know in real life, adds a comment that says, this is misinformation, here's the true information, people do see that, and it can make a huge difference. So we also really want to empower people to, one, understand how to fact check and how to spot misinformation, but also we really want people to come away with some of the knowledge and skills and the things that they really can do to kind of make a big difference for this issue.
One of the things that I know that you want ambassadors to do is, as you just said, you want them to get the right information out there. However, it's so tough because if someone has better information by having gone through your class, there's all this skepticism now, and social media has encouraged aggressive skepticism just for the sake of skepticism. What are some tips that you give to people to help them effectively communicate truth versus myth?
Yeah, that's a really, really great question, and something that we do go over. And as Alex mentioned, there's a huge amount of research that's going into how to best combat misinformation. And truly, it can be broken down into really simple steps, which we go through in the course, but also it's to really sort of state the fact, and then to go ahead and reinforce why, hey, what you're saying is a little bit off kilter or maybe false information because of this reason. But let me go ahead and explain to you the harms of spreading something like this as well. And then let me go ahead and finish up by restating the actual truth, the fact of the matter. But again, keeping in mind that unfortunately, arguing or simply just disagreeing with somebody is really not an effective way to help promote effective conversations, but also effective growth and development in terms of promoting accurate information. If we're just going to dismiss something that doesn't necessarily take it down from the internet, that doesn't necessarily engage somebody to rethink what they're posting or reinvestigate what they're posting, but really by stating the facts, listing why it's harmful to spread whatever it was that was not true, and then going ahead and doing this from a really compassionate, empathetic, kind way is going to be much more effective, and people are going to receive that in a much more pleasant way than just simply saying this is not true and leaving it at that.
Yeah, so this may be a little counterintuitive for some people. I know, like for scientists and researchers, this can be really difficult, but you don't always want to lead with the facts in these kinds of situations. You don't want the other person to be on the defense and to be just trying to, argue with you. You want to have a real conversation with them, right? And so the most important thing you can do to try to have a real conversation where you're really, maybe going to like get your point across is you want to listen. You want to listen to what the other person has to say, and you want to listen with respect. You don't want to be dismissive. You don't want to be defensive. You want to give the other person your full attention. Let them know that you hear what they're saying. And then you kind of want to ask open-ended questions that are going to help you really understand what their concerns really are. And you want to do this even if you disagree. So one of the other things that can be really helpful in these conversations is also sharing your own experience. That can be really powerful for building trust. So, for example, with, new approval for COVID vaccines for younger children, you might want to share something like, hey, I'm taking my son Matt to get vaccinated next Tuesday. When are you taking your son? And if someone, has a piece of misinformation or they're not sure, they have questions, really listen to them and try to get a sense of, are these concerns that you maybe feel like you could direct them to credible information that could really help them make an informed decision. And so again, even if someone disagrees with you, they give you, they have a concern that is based on misinformation, something like the mRNA vaccines might change your DNA. You're just going to have a better, more meaningful conversation if you respond with empathy instead of just responding with, that's not true, So,
exactly. And it really, there's a lot to be said about the art of conversation, because conversation is an art, and to listen, you've got that body language thing going on. You can see somebody bow up whenever you say something they don't agree with, and they've shut down. And no matter, you can talk yourself blue in the face, they are not going to listen. They're not going to agree. They're going to walk away. So as you said, to talk with respect, to talk with truth, and to not be judgmental to people.
Well, and to your point, this is such a serious thing.
Yes.
And it's a really intense subject matter. And so if you're not using interpersonal skills and reading someone's nonverbals and understanding that they legitimately may not want to be vaccinated because of misinformation based upon fear, not wanting to survive. So you're trying to tear down those walls. So
Right.
that's a great point, Diane. How hard is it, or is it hard for you to get people to grasp that aspect of what you like them to do, to learn to listen, to, as Stephen Covey said, seek to understand, then to be understood? How do you get people to grasp that?
I think that's a really important key. One of the things that I really try and promote, not only through this course, but just in my day-to-day life, is just practice. It really comes down to practicing. If someone is coming to me with misinformation, I'm going to try and tease out what is really sort of the underlying component here that is making them fearful, making them not trust best public health guidelines, et cetera. And then so that's the component of listening, is, opening up and saying, okay, I'm going to listen to their concerns, regardless of if it's, false information or slightly ajar information, et cetera, or old information. I'm going to listen and really try and get to the foundation of why they're hesitant. And from that, I can then utilize these interpersonal tools of listening with empathy, having that open body language, to go ahead and not only share some different information, some truthful information, some scientific information, but I'm doing it in a way in which I'm not bombarding them with facts. I'm not going to just throw a bunch of CDC websites at them and say, read up on it. I'm going to give them, I like to think of it as planting seeds. Each of these conversations that I have with somebody who may be vaccine hesitant, I'm planting a seed. And Alex may come along later and she may plant the very same seed. And as there are more of those kinds of conversations, we can then begin to address the really underlying concerns that some of these parents and people have with this factual information. And that may open them up to really understanding and being more open to and receptive to factual information that I can then share, or they can find through scientific resources.
So how many times have you all heard or people come up to you and say, thank you, God bless you, we needed this. It was long overdue, because there's so much out there right now, and to be able to have this course, to feel good about what you're doing. Like you said, parents talking to parents and starting this. I mean, how does that make you feel? I mean, you're the pioneers, you're the leaders on this. Thank you again.
Yeah, no, it's super exciting. And, we did not do this course alone. One of our colleagues, Dr. Rupali Lemay, I think she's talked to somewhere between 2,000 and 3,000 people about vaccines.
Wow.
And so she's kind of known as like the vaccine lady at the pool where her kids go.
I bet she is.
Yeah. And so, it feels really great to like help make a difference for people, and to just make sure that, it makes things a little bit easier, because I think parents and teachers have had, a really rough 2 years, and it feels really good to me to know that we have made this difficult, thing that much easier for them. And we can see that in some of the responses people have to the course. So if you look at the course on Coursera, it has a 99%, rating. And you can look at the comments from people who've taken it, and you can see, people are appreciative, and, people really want to learn some of this information themselves too.
At the end of the day, it's been worth it. All those, I'm sure, the long nights and all the conversations and all the questions you've had with each other, with all your whole team. Do we add this? Do we do that? Is it simple enough? Can people understand that? So it's all come together. It's finally all come together for y'all.
It absolutely has. And yeah, I would hope to echo everyone that helped not only create this. We had some really amazing people helping us create videos and pull together different resources that we can then pull from to create these modules and these lessons. And it was truly a team effort, and it's just been so amazing. After probably the first week, we had, close to 1,000 people that were already registered for the course. And it just completely, I think, blew us out of the water. We were completely shocked that many people were really excited and yearning for something like this. We were hoping that it would be this successful, but we really didn't know how receptive and open people would be to doing one more thing after a long day of work, or, spending a full day with a classroom of kids, whether on Zoom or in person. But I think really kind of keeping it succinct, keeping it short and to the point, and giving people the information that they were really wanting, that was really largely shown to us from our advisory groups, was really, really helpful in terms of what are the biggest questions that you're hearing at soccer practice or on, the school playground. Like what are we hearing and what do we need to make sure that we're addressing? And that was really, really important and impactful, and I think really shows in the way that this has been received.
Wow. So in recap on that particular part of the discussion, beginning your retort to misinformation with "no, idiot, that's not true" is not the most
Probably not
effective
good.
way to get someone to your side
Sadly,
of an
that's going
argument.
to get people to be pretty
yes,
defensive rather than open to learning further. But
What not to do,
That
Clay.
what not to do. That's right. But I laugh about, I joke about that. But there is so much misinformation out there, and you do want people to combat that misinformation. How do you do that? What are some talk about some ways people can combat the information about COVID-19 that's floating out there, that's on the internet and in other places?
Yeah. So, one of the easiest things that I feel like sometimes we take for granted that people can do is sharing true information. You are probably a trusted resource in your community. Your friends and family are going to, have some trust in, I hope, have some trust in you
Right.
and information that you share. And so sharing true information is important. The other thing that can be really important too is, as I think Gretchen was saying earlier, is there are some ways that are more effective to debunk when people share, information that's not true. And a lot of the times people don't necessarily realize they're sharing information that's not true, right? Like they're not intentionally trying to mislead anyone. And so I know it may not sound like much, but sometimes putting a comment, under that post that says, this is actually misinformation, and we go through this in the training, but you can take some basic fact checking steps. So what is the source? Is this coming from a credible source? When was it published? Does it include images or video that's been manipulated in some way? Where is the evidence coming from a story? So again, it sounds like a really little thing, but just asking some of these questions, either in person or, online in your social media, can actually really make a big difference. And people will often go, oh, I didn't realize that, this was coming from something that I've never heard of before, or, oh, I didn't realize that this wasn't true. And so just steps like that not only help prevent the spread of misinformation, just, fewer people seeing it, but it also really helps educate people about, some of these good habits on how to check before you share to make sure something seems like it really is true or it really is coming from a credible source.
And just to add on sort of that more interpersonal level, when you're having these conversations, no one is expecting anyone to be an expert in all matters, especially with something like a vaccine or immunology, et cetera. I think one of the most important things is when I don't know an answer, I'm going to go ahead and do my best to go find the answer. And that's an okay response to when someone asks me a question and I don't know the exact details of what they're asking. I'm going to say, you know what, I'm not exactly sure of how to best answer that, but I'm going to find that for you. And then I'm happily going to send that onwards to you and make sure that, like Alex is saying, that I'm not just going to make up or pull from something that I heard. I'm going to do my due diligence and make sure that what I'm sharing is true, is from scientific resources, et cetera.
And that is the respectful answer too. I don't know, because we don't know everything, and you don't want to just pull something out of the air and then have it, like when you were a kid and you played gossip, one misstep, it goes on and on and on and on. By the time that it reaches, another family, who knows? We've created a monster here. But what an excellent, thought for people to know. You don't have to know everything.
Absolutely not. I wouldn't expect that anyone be an absolute expert in all matters. But it's, the wonderful thing about being in such an age in which technology is at our fingertips, we can find out these answers. There are wonderful, credible resources that we can look to for the most updated information. And I think that can be a really powerful tool in not only your own understanding and confidence, but also promoting accurate information, whether it be in those conversations with family and friends, but also online.
So how does one test the message and the messaging to make certain that it is saturating in the right way?
Testing the message and sort of getting a sense if it's hitting right is it's a little challenging. It kind of depends on, who we're talking to, what is the context. But one of the things that has been seen in research on vaccine hesitancy for a while is that a lot of people, the majority of people, are willing to change their minds if they get information that answers their concerns. And so it's, I think, really helpful if you're talking to someone to ask these open-ended questions to make sure that you understand, what the concern is, so that you can kind of look up answers together. And so that's something I think is really helpful if you're talking to a family member or someone is, say they have a particular question or a particular concern, is you can say, as we were just saying, you may not know the answer offhand, but you can say, I'm not sure about that myself, but that is a really important question. Do you want to look that up together and we can try to figure that out together? And I think that's a really good way to kind of engage people. As far as message testing, if you're looking at a bigger scale, right? So like a public health department or maybe, something like that. I think you really, again, it comes down to listening. You have to kind of think about, who am I trying to talk to and what are their questions? And am I really answering these questions? And so, we've been doing a lot of message testing research and we find that the answer is it depends. It really depends on who you're trying to reach and where they are kind of in their own process. Some people really just need a little nudge. They just want to have a little bit more understanding of, their strong consensus. I think it's something like 93, 94, it may even be up to 97% of doctors, support people getting fully immunized against COVID-19. And something like that can be enough for most people. And then you might have other folks who really have, gone down the rabbit hole with getting into misinformation, and, messaging for that group may be a lot more challenging. And you have to be patient and really give people time to kind of make their own minds up and to, think through some of the information that's out there for them.
I was going to ask, you've both said this a couple times, that you don't overwhelm people with the facts or analysis or statistics. So what is a proper balance of anecdotal information versus the hard statistical data when you're trying to explain something to someone?
I think that's a really important question and definitely something that is on a very large scale. I think it really depends on where people fall in terms of hesitancy and where their beliefs are. I think I prefer just personally to start with something more anecdotal, starting with something that really helps people open up and be open to then coming in with one or two factual points. Based on whatever it is that their concerns are. But I think opening with that vulnerability of me sharing a personal story or of me sharing something that I was, witnessing in terms of, someone getting sick with COVID or how they responded to a vaccine, et cetera, can allow people to not immediately get defensive, but kind of relax a little bit and put that wall down just a smidge in order for me to then have a much more productive conversation in terms of sharing facts or promoting accurate information. But again, like you said, you don't want to bombard them with just fact after fact after fact. Give them time to digest it. Give them time to sit with it and think through it. And then maybe in a week, come back with something else, listening to their concerns again. And maybe they've shifted. Their concerns are something different now, and that's okay too. we are all very multifaceted. And so it is not a one size fits all approach. Really listening and engaging with that person in an open and honest way, I think is probably going to be the best way to continue having those conversations and make sure that they're being as effective as they possibly can.
I think that is important, that we always have to remember that we have to learn and then sometimes relearn the tools that we use. And this course that you all put together, How to Talk to Parents About Vaccines, wow, y'all hit it out of the ballpark. You hit it out of the ballpark. It's going to be so helpful, not only now, but on down the line. In our podcast today, we've covered a lot of topics. We've given a lot of concrete, good, correct information. Is there anything in our last minutes that we haven't talked about that you ladies would like for our listeners to be aware of today?
I feel like, Gretchen, there's only sort of one more tip for having conversations with people that comes to mind to me. That's just a really easy one.
We like easy. We like easy.
Okay, good. So this comes from, again, like decades of research on how do you talk to people about vaccines. So this is true for, all vaccines, not just COVID-19, but, we kind of want to do what we see as what everyone else is doing. So this is, in research, we call this a social norm. And so when people feel that the social norm is that, other people are getting vaccinated and they're okay, that's a real motivator for a lot of people. So in these conversations, dropping in that, over 200 million Americans have been fully vaccinated, or, the vast majority of people have been fully vaccinated, that can be, very persuasive for a lot of people. And that's, again, that is true not just for COVID-19 vaccines, but for other vaccines as well. So that's just another one of those, simple tips that is really research-based that can really help people have these conversations.
I think, like you're saying, Alex, creating that social norm or allowing people to learn that, hey, people in our community, this percent of people in our community have been vaccinated. Allowing people to understand that that is now the social norm in their community, or being the person who starts that social norm. Saying, I got vaccinated, my whole family is vaccinated. That can really help promote positive vaccine behavior, but also make people feel more comfortable to having conversations and asking, like, hey, how did you and your family respond to the vaccine? I think there's a lot of questions in terms of side effects because it is a spectrum. And so you can then share your experience. And that's a really helpful and beneficial tool that you don't need scientific fact for that. You are just sharing your own experience. And that can be a really good opening for becoming, your own community's vaccine ambassador.
So great.
I'm so sorry.
No, go ahead, Alex. Go ahead. Yeah, it's okay. Go ahead.
No, and I think one more sort of tidbit that I think is really important too is the American Academy of Family Physicians just published a survey of 2,000 Americans, and they were asking them about trust in vaccines. How has the pandemic affected your trust in vaccines generally? And they found that the majority of respondents expressed no change. So 40% of people, said it hasn't really changed anything for me. But they also saw 30% of people actually experienced an increase in vaccine confidence since the pandemic. And so, I think that's like a really important thing to keep in mind is some of these conversations, again, are actually working. They actually really do help people feel like they understand, why vaccines are important and how they are helpful and how vaccines help us protect each other.
Is there a number one in the course of talking or dialoguing with people who've gone through your course? Is there a number one myth that you heard or saw more consistently than others?
Oh, I don't know. That one of the real challenges with the myths and misinformation is they are constantly changing. So that is really tough to answer. I think the main concern that people have that I think comes up in a lot of misinformation is I think people have concerns about potential side effects from the vaccines. And so far, what we've seen in the data, again, over 200 million Americans, fully vaccinated, is that the risks of getting COVID-19 are much, much higher for you and your family than some of the potential risks or side effects from the vaccines. And so in the training, we actually go through some of the comparisons. So again, kind of more like an apples to apples comparison. So people can get a sense of, there have been some rare side effects from the vaccines. That does happen. But also COVID-19 itself can cause, damage to many different organ systems in the body. And I think people don't always, see that in the news and aren't always aware of that. And so getting to see the real sort of comparison, I think answers a lot of the questions we get around, potential side effects or trade-offs of the vaccine versus getting sick with COVID-19.
And I believe that's a case in point to what you said, Gretchen. That's when your personal story or that testimony to your health, that's what plays so well, because you're not being an expert. You're just saying, this is what I've done, this is how it impacted me, and this is why I did it.
Exactly. Yeah. And obviously context changes concerns, but I think overwhelmingly allowing people to not only hear your own testimonies, hear your own stories, but really sharing, that there are significant risks associated with COVID itself. And so by being vaccinated, and that allows you to have a much more mild case of COVID if you do in fact get COVID post-vaccines, as opposed to the risks and health concerns that arise if you're not vaccinated and you get COVID. I think those are really, really important, but also, like Alex mentioned, unfortunately, myths and misinformation changes at the drop of a dime. And so hopefully we can use some of these tools and recognize these myths and misinformation better so that we can be more effective at combating and having better conversations.
And that's kind of the nature of the beast of being a human being, isn't it? Yep.
It
And it's
is.
going to go on forever, I think.
Well, Alex, Gretchen, we appreciate you so much, the work that you're doing at Johns Hopkins, and really this effort to get rid of so much of the misinformation out there. Thank you so much for joining us.
You both were
Thank you.
fabulous. Thank you.
It's been a pleasure.
And we hope that everyone who's been listening has enjoyed this wealth of knowledge that has been shared with us today. Thank you for listening to another episode of Vax Matters.